Okay, continuing with the American Sweetheart theme. One of America's Sweetheart in the 80s and 90s was Meg Ryan. You might remember her from Sleepless in Seattle or uh, You've Got Mail, or she did a bunch. There was another one where she was with a lot of females. It was called The Women. So she's done a lot. A lot. And also, she stars with Tom Hanks, and he could be considered the guy you want to have a beer with or whatever. Like, he's cool with being with the guys, but he's a real nice guy to the ladies also. So, you know. Okay, so in the movie, and also it stars Polly Parrot, I believe. She's famous for NCIS. So later on, she went to do NCIS. So, okay. So, okay. For all the guys and girls out there that don't know the backstory of this movie, this was done in the heyday of the internet, only when it was just beginning. Maybe it was a couple years old, but where you had dial up and to wait, I had to wait for everything to connect to your computer, and AOL was the only internet service provider at the time. Now, of course, that's not true, but okay. So, and then it also goes along with the chat rooms. So, she says, as a joke, she popped in the 30s room on her birthday, whenever that was, and she met this guy. But they didn't exchange any personal information. No names, no location, no job, no nothing. So they just chatted. Well, as it goes, his name is Joe Fox, and he's kind of well to do. And his father's played by the wonderful Dabney Coleman. So, yeah. Okay. And what's funny or ironic in this film is that everything that she dislikes, he is. But like they always say, the heart wants what it wants. So, they fall in love despite all that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So they meet in a chat room and they don't know anything about each other. And they run into each other a few times. And he doesn't know who she is, like at all. Her name is Catherine Kelly, and she's very famous because she's had a bookstore in her family for years. And her mother used to run it. She passed away and gave it to her, right? And the thing is, his grandfather knew her mother. They used to exchange letters back in the days of pen pals. You've seen letters back and forth. Um, and his grandfather said, yes, she had beautiful penmanship. So, yeah. So then they continue meeting and they meet at parties because he owns booksellers and bookstores, and she owns her little bookstore, like a neighborhood bookstore, but they don't know, right? All he knows is that she's annoying, and they meet at a holiday party, and she doesn't like it when he takes the caviar to eat it because she's like, that's caviar. It's a garnish. You're not supposed to eat it. So to be annoying, he takes even more of the caviar, puts it on a spoon, and then plops it on his plate. um, yeah, so, And then, of course, everybody notices a change in her more than him. And because her friend, a younger girl who works in the bookstore with her, is like, "What's up with you?" And she's like, "What do you mean? I'm just having fun." And she's like, "No, no, no, there's something more to it." And then there's this older lady that's her friend, played by Jean Stapleton. Um, Yeah, so uh, uh, like I always say, A-list cast. And so then another funny scene is when they're trying to get the bookstore, and it's going to be a made-up books, like a giant bookstore. Like imagine a Barnes and Noble, but like huge. Okay, and actually Dave Chappelle plays his best friend, and he's worried about how successful they're going to be. And Joe is like, "Don't worry about it, because we sell books and legal stimulants." So if we don't have a book, then they can't find it because we're gonna have everything. So yeah. So okay. So the turning point is that he has a crisis of conscience slightly because he realizes that he's starting to have feelings for this girl, you know, and he doesn't want her to lose her business, but he wants his business to grow. So, but then through messages, he convinces her to start writing again. And so he kind of helps her without knowing it. And then they finally decide to go on a date. But then he shows up, but then he looks in the window and he psychs himself out and says, "I can't do it, can't do it." So then she gets all in her head and says, "Well, maybe he saw me and didn't like me, so then he ran off." So then she is trying to figure out what happened and says, I'm trying to find out why you didn't come or something. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing you would do. So then at first, and this is how you know he likes her, because at first he's gonna like BS her. Sorry, I almost said the bad word. But at first he's gonna BS her. But then he realizes that he likes her, and he realizes that his lies are so ludicrous that no one would believe them. So then he stops himself. So then, okay, here's the pivotal scene that I knew that he liked her, because she sends an email about what happened, And at first he's got his coat on and gonna type out something real quick and just send it, right? So then he realizes how BS it is. So then he backspaces all the way to the beginning of the message, takes his coat off, sits down, and writes the truth. Well, kind of. Like a softer version, And he says, "I can't tell you who I am, but I will. When the time is right, I will." So he doesn't BS her anymore. And to be honest, I don't think he ever did. So that's when you know that he likes her. And I think that she always liked him. But, as a woman, you're afraid to hope for a guy that you like to be the guy that likes you back. So I can relate to this movie. Um, yeah, um, so then of course, they do meet, and and then of course, subsequently they meet a bunch of times, and they just hang out. And he's like the guy that's always there for her, always does little sweet gestures, you know. And then about, I don't know, 10 minutes before the movie's going to end, they finally set a date to meet. And they're going to meet in the park at the pathway. And they finally found out that it's each other. And she's crying, like, not crying, but like crying, a tear in her eye. And he's like, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "I always hoped it was you, but I was scared. But I'm so glad it's you." So, they fall in love at that moment. So, yeah. And also, it happens to have, like I said, a Christmas, New Year's theme. So, you get all that stuff rolled into one for about 2.5 hours. It's a good watch. I watch it almost every year or two. I do. And it's one of those that I always see something different every time I watch it. So I highly recommend it. Okay, bye guys.